My name is Jim Green from the Department of Systems and Computer Engineering, and it's my pleasure to serve as your Master of Ceremonies tonight. To begin the evening, it's my pleasure to present the President and Vice Chancellor of Carleton University, Dr. Roseanne O'Reilly-Runte.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here on a beautiful, beautiful day. I told everyone that came from out of town that every day at Carleton is like this. And you know, it is. It's not about the sunshine. It's about the bright, eager faces that I see. It's about people discovering new ideas. And there is no faculty of which I am more proud than the Faculty of Engineering and Design. And I'd like to thank your dean, I see the associate dean, the faculty here, for their leadership. They are extraordinary people. And I like to brag. I like to go and say there's an ideas contest in Toronto. And every year for 3 years, we've gotten the first and second and sometimes the third prize too. No other university has as many good ideas as we do. And then I like to brag about the solar house that you built and went down to California with it and won the top engineering prize. And the fact that I get a note from California which says that they're not going to be inviting anybody from Canada back because they can't stand the competition. You are absolutely extraordinary students, and I'm proud of every one of you. I know that you will design beautiful things, you will build useful things, and you'll make a difference in the world. It is a pleasure to start off the year welcoming back extraordinary alumni. John Duff, I met your boss this morning, and he told me that he was so proud that you were coming back to Carleton and speaking tonight. So thank you for that, and thank you for making us proud, as well as your boss. Suzanne Rochford, thank you so much for coming to Carleton and speaking to us. We appreciate your fine work at Telus, and thank you for sharing your great ideas. And Mr. Abbott, thank you so much, because there is a great link between business and engineering, and we need to know about that link. So I would like to ask you all, before you welcome the panel, because that's going to be introduced by the dean, to help me welcome your wonderful dean who leads you all to greater success every year.
Thank you, President Runte, and thank you for continuous support to the faculty. The faculty's done really well in the past few years due to your strong support. Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted that you're able to be with us here tonight. My name is Rafiq Gubran, and I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and Design here at Carleton. It's my pleasure to introduce this special event on the evolution of information technologies. So the progression of information technology has become a key influence in the world in which we live. So information technology transcends disciplines, connect our world, and offer exciting opportunities that can create new challenges and dictate the future of industry. So we find information technology everywhere, not just as information technology in networks and so on, but you find it anywhere in applications ranging from healthcare to construction to bridges to infrastructure security. So that's what information technology is about. So our research-intensive Faculty of Engineering and Design continues to grow and adapt to meet emerging needs, including those in the ever-evolving information technology sector. I'm proud to note that 2016 will see the launch of our new Information Resource Management program. So this is a new Bachelor of Information Technology program that deals with how to manage information and handle information from the storage aspect to the retrieval aspect to the privacy aspect and so on. So that program joins a very wide range of programs in IT that we offer in the faculty. So these programs include our Bachelor of Engineering in Software Engineering, Bachelor of Engineering in Computer Systems Engineering, in Communications Engineering, Electrical Engineering, and also we have the BIT, or Bachelor of Information Technology, that we offer with Algonquin College in Network Technology and Interactive and Multimedia Design. It's my pleasure to welcome back 2006 graduates of our software engineering program, John Duff. So as Director of Engineering at Shopify, John presents a fine example of the success Carleton Engineering and Design graduates can expect to find in the real world. Thanks in part to the Faculty of Engineering and Design commitment to hands-on experiential learning and labs, we always hope that our graduates will find fantastic jobs in industry. I would like to welcome Suzanne Rochford from Telus Health. So we've had the opportunity to work with Telus Health and with Suzanne for many, many years. They were a major player in the healthcare support through information technology enhancement, or HSITE, that was an NSERC strategic network of excellence. I'd also like to welcome Mike Abbott from Deloitte for joining us tonight. Deloitte is a valued co-op employer for us, and we've been to co-op to Deloitte a few times, and we're trying to set up some more partnership with Deloitte as well. So we hope to be able to establish those in the near future. So, and now please join me in welcoming back Professor Jim Green, who will be our Master of Ceremony for today. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Rafiq. Tonight's Throwback Homecoming event, From Innovation to Enterprise, Opportunities and the Evolution of Information Technology, will comprise 3 presentations from industry leaders in the field of information technology. A brief Q&A session will follow the presentations, so we please ask that you hold all questions until the end. I'll note also that there's 3 door prizes available to students, which will be drawn by our panelists at the conclusion of this session. A complimentary reception will follow. I'd now like to introduce our first guest, Mr. John Duff.
Thank you. So as mentioned, I work for Shopify, and I think a lot of people have heard about Shopify before, but before I talk about anything else, just wanted to tell you a little bit about what Shopify is and what we do, because it's very relevant to what is happening in technology, specifically in Ottawa and Canada. A lot of people don't realize that Shopify is an Ottawa company. We started here, we remain here, we've expanded into a number of different other locations in Canada, but our home is in Ottawa, which is really great and a really great place for us to continue to grow and develop. Shopify builds commerce software. So what we're doing is building a platform for people to be able to buy and sell things online or offline or wherever they might need to. So we do this by providing an online store, letting people buy things from a point of sale in retail, letting people buy things from their phone or from Facebook or from Pinterest, wherever you might have your customers or might be selling. A big part of what makes Shopify interesting is the fact that we can sit in the middle of all this and become the center of the business and allow people to sell wherever they need to. So 10 years ago, we might be having people selling on MySpace or something like that, but now it's Facebook. And 10 years from now, it might be something different. But Shopify can sit in the middle and connect all these things together and allow people to continue selling wherever they might be. That's what's really interesting about the future of technology, is we don't know where it's going to bring us. It's really cool because right now we're standing on the cusp of what the future is. We're building it right now. We're creating it. Everyone here is going to be building the future tomorrow, and we're going to be building on top of that to make something new and more interesting again. And we can't really tell where that's going to bring us. If I was going to talk about what the future of technology is, I wouldn't want to say, I can't actually say what that's going to be because you can't tell right now. There's a lot of different ways things can go, but what makes it interesting is if you can build a platform, build a product, or build your skills to be able to leverage those depending on what the future is, even when you don't know what that's going to be, that's really powerful. So a big part of what I do at Shopify is run engineering teams and build and grow the engineering teams there. So my experience has been really interesting because I've been able to see the company grow from 60 people to over 800 now in under 4.5 years. And that experience has been really powerful because it's given me a lot of skills to be able to grow further and take that to wherever I might and whatever problems I might need to solve in the future. Finding a high growth company like Shopify is really powerful to individuals here. If you can find something like Shopify or another company like Shopify that's growing in this way, you're going to be able to build skills that are going to help you do things at a different scale and a bigger scale than you would ever dream of. When I started at Shopify, I started as a developer. The development team was 30 people. I spent a year learning the technologies. I went super deep into the areas that I knew. I learned them really well, and then I expanded and learned the platform and the related technologies. I started leading teams, starting with the API team, and that quickly grew into 3 or 4 different teams. After 2.5 years, I was promoted to Director of Engineering and continued the growth, expanding my responsibilities to hiring, culture, growing the engineering team, and building out our processes and different practices for how we're going to do engineering, build, and grow the company into the future. About 6 months ago, I was leading around a 150-person development team across 3 different cities and helping the entire company grow and develop engineering, hiring, culture, all those different things. The really great part with a growth company like Shopify is you can go really deep and really far, but then you can also turn directions really quickly. So now I'm actually focusing in on smaller projects and going really deep again into those projects and making them better and trying to figure out how to solve those problems in very specific areas. So this is really powerful for people who are coming into technology and wanting to learn and grow and develop their own skills. And I would really encourage finding a company that can help you expand in those different ways and doesn't put boundaries into what you need to do and what you need to learn. One of the great parts about Shopify is it lets you expand into whatever skill and responsibilities that you're willing to take on. So I'm able to grow and develop into whatever areas I'm willing and able to jump into, and I'm able to expand those skill sets. And those are the things that are really important to drive technology forward into the future, is to expand those skills and to learn how to apply those at different levels. So I've seen a company at 60 people, I've seen a company at 800 people, I haven't quite seen a company at 1,000 or 4,000 people yet, but in the future, that's what I'm looking forward to. And then taking those skills and applying those in different ways. And when you're growing at this rate, it makes it really interesting and you have to solve these problems really quickly. And it's a really big challenge, but it also has big rewards to it as well. So like I said, I don't know what the future of technology is going to be. All I know is it's going to be something different than what we see today. The future of Shopify is going to be something different than we see today, but we want to sit in the middle of that business and be able to connect to whatever that future is. I'm really excited for what's coming in technology because everything keeps picking up at an increasing rate, and it gets really interesting and lots of problems being solved at a bigger and bigger scale. So tomorrow, the problems that we solve are going to be bigger than the ones we're solving today, and allows the people in this room to solve bigger things at a much larger scale. So thank you for inviting me, and looking forward to the questions we're going to answer. And next up, I would like to introduce Susan, who's going to give her introduction.
Thanks very much. It's quite telling, actually, that somebody who comes from a small startup has their speaker's notes on a cell phone, whereas I still have mine on paper, and I'll talk a little bit about the challenges in healthcare as associated with that. It's great to see you all here. I'm really impressed with the number of people who have shown up. Your inquisitiveness and initiative will serve you all well. So I'm Suzanne Rochford. I'm here representing Telus Health, and you'll ask, Telus Health, what does Telus have to do with health? Many people ask that question. Telus, of course, is a service provider. They provide telecommunications services, such as mobile phone services. Telus Health is a subsidiary or an arm of Telus, if you will, that is one of the main providers of healthcare systems in Canada. So if you go to the Ottawa Hospital, for example, they are using a Telus Health system to pull together all the information on you as a patient. There's a good chance when you go to your doctor's office that, in fact, they're using a Telus Health system, or when you go to your pharmacy. So that is a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today is the challenges in the healthcare industry and where IT can play. So as I mentioned about the paper versus the cell phone, healthcare technology is actually 20 years behind. It is where the financial systems were, maybe in the early 1980s. That can be a good thing or a bad thing. The good thing about it is, from your perspective as young engineers coming out into the world, there's a huge opportunity to make a difference to how we all live as Canadians. The early focus for scarce funds, the reasons for some of that delay is that the early focus for scarce funds was really spent on expensive diagnostic equipment such as MRI machines and this kind of thing. Recently, though, over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen a huge, huge shift in terms of the adoption of electronic systems, point systems in the various areas. So pharmacies were the first, as you know. I mean, when was the last time you went to a pharmacy and they weren't using a computer, right, to enter your prescription? Dentist offices, same thing. More recently, however, hospitals definitely have been bringing that on, although they're still half paper and half electronic, as you probably will experience when you go into hospitals, but that's slowly shifting over. It's quite a big challenge because they are very complex systems in a hospital to pull together all the pieces. Doctors' offices, probably the last place that you've seen it. Over your lifetime, you've probably seen your doctor switch from paper to electronic systems. And finally, getting into telehealth and remote patient monitoring. And mobility really is a very late entry into supporting healthcare because of, until only recently, high volume data services and privacy of data on mobile phones has not been available. And of course, you really don't want to be sending around very sensitive information about the patient's health record if it's not completely secure. So that's a huge opportunity. The benefits that we've seen from electronic, from IT in healthcare include better access to patient records. It was a big problem in hospitals. Somebody would walk off with a patient record, and because they needed to do work on it, somebody else needed access to it. It was somewhere with a doctor's, the binder, but multiple people couldn't access the system at the same time. Much faster access to results. You don't have to mail the lab results to your doctor. They come automatically electronically once the lab has completed the tests. Reduction of unnecessary, expensive, and potentially harmful tests where, we can get information about what tests have been completed previously in the hospital in your previous visit there and not repeat those tests unnecessarily. And some of those, like x-rays, MRIs, and CAT scans, come with a risk like radiation exposure. Reduce medication errors. So all pharmacy systems and doctor's office systems include a drug checking module with a bunch of, with some artificial intelligence, a rules engine, if you will, that every time a medication is prescribed or filled in the pharmacy, they'll look at what else has been prescribed for you, whether you have any allergies, and it will raise alerts if there's a potential problem with combining those medications. However, there's also some risk associated with introducing technology into complex systems, especially where patient safety and patient lives are at stake. You can get patient misidentification. And the biggest problem is that physicians, because it becomes electronic, end up over-relying on the system to be accurate, right? And in complex systems, there can be glitches. Patient misidentification, where you've got the wrong patient file that you're working on. Failure to produce appropriate alerts. So a lab result comes in that is negative or particularly very, a really bad result. The doctor now relies on some kind of alert in the system to flag them to look at it, as opposed to it being in a file folder that's in their inbox that they're going through everything. So there can be problems with alerts being missed or bad lab results being missed. Issues with double dosing or drug errors, because again, there's over-reliance on the drug checking system to issue all of the alerts that may happen. Important critical orders being missed. There's something called a stat order in healthcare, which means right away. And those are sent by electronic systems now. Previously, if it was really important, the doctor would make a phone call, right? And that's, in most cases, still the case, but they're relying more and more on electronic systems. And if it's really critical, it's important that that stat order be seen right away. Other issues like data migration errors from one system to the other, where there's a loss of data integrity, poor workflow, and mapping appropriately to the clinician's workflow. When it was on paper, it was easy. It was very flexible. You had bits of paper. You could, basically send those pieces of paper anywhere you wanted. When you were writing out prescriptions or writing out lab orders, if the form wasn't exactly what you wanted to order, you could, and doctors did, they would scribble notes on the side of the form, right, and just submit that to the pharmacy or the lab. Well, in an electronic system, they don't have that option anymore. So if the system isn't designed to really support their workflow, then it can be really problematic. Network outages. If there's a network outage, you don't have a paper file anymore. What do? You don't have access to really critical information. Security of patient information, and so on. So there are challenges for sure in electronic systems. So where are we today? We're a little behind. We have in Telus Health, we have a really, I think, very simple but very compelling 3-point strategy to transform healthcare in Canada. The first and the 3 steps are reach, collaboration, and outcomes. Reach is about getting electronic systems out there delivering them well so that they support the clinicians in point systems. So getting them into pharmacies, getting them into your dentist's office, getting them into your doctor's office, and so on. So we're getting there, and we've made a huge amount of progress over the last few years. The next piece of that is collaboration, though. Right now, all those point systems don't talk to each other. The hospital system doesn't talk to the doctor's office system. Doctor's office system doesn't talk to the pharmacy system. You're still carrying a paper, even though it's now printed out, you're still carrying a paper prescription to the pharmacy, right? So one of the big opportunities there are is to make these systems talk to each other, which has a whole bunch of benefits, right? Let me give you a little use case. Unfortunately, in 2014, I lost both of my parents. My mother died from cancer that returned that she'd been fighting for many years. And I'll talk about that in a minute. My father, I tell people, died of a broken heart 6 months later. But the issue with, and I saw it in person, is in the last stages of her life, there were so many people involved in taking care of her. There were people at the retirement residence. There was the community care nurse. There were the doctors that she saw when she went in and out of the hospital. There were her family physician, the specialists, the oncologists, gynecologists, and so on that were seeing her. And guess what? None of them, the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, right? Because they're sending information to each other scattered in emails and phone calls, and sometimes there isn't communication. So that is what collaboration and Telus Health want to fix. Is how do we get that information together so that we have a coherent view across all of the various people who provide health care, and they can see a coherent view of any given patient. Some of the ways that we're doing that is we've done some initial implementations of the ability for a doctor's office to send your prescription directly to your preferred pharmacy, and then allow secure messaging between the pharmacist and the doctor's office, so that if there are questions by the pharmacist, they can be done securely and asynchronously. The problem is, right now they play telephone tag. The pharmacist has a question, calls the doctor's in with a patient, okay? When the doctor finally gets back to them, the pharmacist is busy with a customer, and they do this, telephone tag thing. Of course, they can't use, email's not really secure, and texting is definitely not secure for this kind of patient information, so we've built that into the system. Drug pre-adjudication in EMRs. So one of the things that Telus does is health billing adjudication. So every time you go to the dentist and your bill is sent automatically to the insurance company for you on your behalf, that goes through a Telus server. And so one of the things we're looking at is one of the big reasons that patients don't fulfill their medication is because of cost, because they get to the pharmacist and ends up being too expensive. So we're looking at plugging the insurance company systems together with the doctor's office so that when they prescribe that medication right in their doctor's office system, it'll show right away what coverage you have. And if the coverage is not very good for the drug that they want to use, it will show them alternatives that are just as effective for your condition but are much less expensive because they have better coverage. These are the kinds of interconnections that we can do. A really critical one is having common patient data that a number of different systems can plug into. So in the Greater Toronto area, we have a system that Telus Health has helped to stand up called CGTA, Connecting Greater Toronto Area, and that's going to be expanded to Connecting Ontario. And what that is it basically puts all of your lab results, all the medications you filled at pharmacies, any diagnostics, any discharge summaries that have come from hospital stays into a common repository. So if you do go to see another specialist, you end up in emergency, whatever, physicians or healthcare professionals can easily see what you've been through in the last little while, what medications you're on, which is really critical. If you show up in the emergency department because of a car accident and you're unconscious, but you're diabetic or epileptic, well, you're in the hospital to be taken care of because of the car accident. But if you're not given your insulin, right, or your epilepsy medication, there could be serious repercussions. So that's the kind of information that we can share, and that's what's happening in Toronto will be extended to Ontario. So those are just some examples, and I've got lots of them, in how we can interconnect these systems and have them collaborate. With patients, there's going to be a big push on ownership. So you've heard of Web 2.0, where consumers now have a much bigger impact on what products are provided and the quality of service through Web 2.0, things like TripAdvisor, online customer product reviews, impacting policy through online things like Aves and Some of Us. Soon what we're going to see is much more interaction by patients in their own healthcare. patients now, unlike our parents' generation, our parents or grandparents considered the doctor God. You know, the doctor knew best. We've got a much better educated population and much better access to information. And so there's a number of different ways in which patients can be much more involved in the healthcare and the care for them, be partners in that decision making, and start to move towards more proactive healthcare, where we're looking at things like wearable devices to be able to, and at-home measuring, for example, of your insulin, blood sugar levels if you're diabetic, and being able to share that summary of information or report with your doctor when you do go in to see them in a more easy electronic format. We're looking at things like behavior modification for proactive healthcare. So we've sponsored some research, for example, at the University of Toronto, University Health Network, around an application called BANT that is given to, it's a game-like application that's given to children or teenagers who have diabetes. And it asks them to consistently enter and test their blood sugar levels, enter their blood sugar levels. And when they do that, they get points. Their parents feed the system with points for iTunes. And what they found is they more consistently measure and manage their insulin and blood sugar levels. And even after the BANT application is taken away from them, that behavior modification sticks. So they continue to have that better behavior even afterwards. So this is some of the research that we're doing, which is quite interesting. Some of the challenges. Big Brother is watching. So once we get all your data into these provincial level, you know, there's a question of security. Who gets to see that information? What access can they get? Billing legislation. So one of the things we'd like to do, for example, is leverage remote visits. So Skype-type visits with your doctor. Why do you have to go in to see your doctor every time you want to see them? Why can't you just have a Skype-based meeting with them from your home using a laptop, especially if you have disability issues? The problem is the current legislation for billing doesn't allow the doctor to bill for that kind of an encounter. So that's the kind of thing that has to be changed as well. Medical system licensing is provincial, and all the rules for each province is slightly different. So in order to get certified, you need to actually do a different set of things for every province in order to certify your medical systems, which is a huge challenge. And finally, we talk about outcomes. The most important thing with any of this is to demonstrate that, in fact, the IT changes that we're making have material outcomes on people's health. So we're not just doing a bunch of work and spending a bunch of money and actually not seeing any real change in terms of the quality of the health care that we're getting, in terms of recovery times, in terms of reduction of return to the emergency department and so on. So we're sponsoring, Telus Health is sponsoring studies to confirm that in fact the technology that is looking to be put into use actually has real outcomes for patients at the end of the day. I can go on and on. It's a pretty interesting area, lots of interesting opportunities, and if anybody is interested in that, they certainly come to talk to me afterwards. And I'll pass it on, I guess, to John from Deloitte. Thanks very much.
Hi, thank you. So I'll introduce myself quickly. I'm Mike Abbott, partner with Deloitte. I'll give you a bit of my background. Hopefully you guys don't hold it against me. I'm not an engineer. I'm an accountant by original trade, but I'll pause there and tell you how I ended up in the space I'm in. I lasted about 2 years doing accounting, and then I hated it, so I switched, and I started implementing IT systems. Started very early in my career in Deloitte, realized that that's what I was a little bit more passionate about doing. And I started building security within those systems. So that was about 18 years ago, coming up to 19 years ago. And my career morphed, and I still had my accounting background, if I can still call it that, that really led me into being a little bit more conservative by nature and wearing a risk hat a lot. So a lot of the things I do on a day-to-day basis is I highlight bad things about things that people do, and I point out what can go wrong. So I advise clients on a daily basis from risk management around technology into cybersecurity. And I would say I've been doing cybersecurity for the better part of 15 years, but I think it just got called cybersecurity about 5 years ago. Before we just called it IT security, and it's actually the same thing. But that's the one thing in technology I'll just sort of highlight, and I know a few of you I talked to outside. in the realm of technology, one thing to be careful of is a lot of the names change. Quite often the stuff underneath actually doesn't. So the notion of cloud in technology, we used to just call it data centers. It's the same thing. Cybersecurity is just IT. So just a bit of a background of how I ended up where I am today. So been a partner for 8 years. I kind of lose track of that. Most of my clients, although not all, are public sector. So I'd say about 70% of my work is public sector, and that's federal government and crown corporations. And the other 30% are private or public companies. And the type of work that I do, it really does range from getting my hands dirty to building systems and advising on the building of systems, through to guiding management, executives, boards, in some cases ministers or deputy ministers through tough decisions, helping them identify what are the things that can go wrong, what are the things that they can do. One of the things I would certainly point out when you're in this realm and you're in the business of assessing, and so about, people look at Deloitte and if you didn't know, they'd quite often think it's auditors, and a big chunk of the business that we do is audit. But I'd call it assessments. We are viewed as a trusted third party to come and tell you what we think is good or bad about you. So about 50% of the business that I'm in is in the assessment phase, where we go in and we assess organizations of how well they're doing in certain areas. What we found over the years is when you tell someone that here's something bad, they quite often want to know, okay, well, how do I fix that? And I would say we've been in this in the business of fixing stuff. We got away from just doing auditing 30, 40 years ago because a lot of our clients wanted to know how to fix things. And so about 50% of our business is assessing and looking at it, and sometimes we see things that are good, and that's okay. It's okay to tell a client that they're doing something well, but equally they want to know when they're doing something badly. And so 30% of the work is building solutions, is building, from my perspective, building technologies, configuring technologies, deploying it. And the other 20%, we actually operate. For some of our clients, we operate security, we operate IT systems, and that just gives you a sense of the breakdown. The one thing in the cyber realm, and it's in technology, you talked about integrating business and engineering. One of the things that I've developed in my own career is connecting with the finance shop with the IT shop. Because for years, people looked at IT and said, that's a black box. I don't understand it. I don't want to understand it. I want to get technical people who understand it, and I'll trust them. And then more and more people started saying, well, that's probably not good enough. I need to understand a little bit more. And part of that happened because technology would get implemented, and it would solve one problem, and it would create another problem. So I heard the comment about workflows, and that was, I thought, a pretty good example where technology was coming in to fix one problem, and now the little notes of doctors on the side, that's a new problem that perhaps they didn't think about. So that's the one thing about technology. It always builds and creates new issues. So people would look at IT and say, it's a black box, I don't want to understand it. More and more finance folks and executives want to understand, I need to know a little bit more about what's in that black box. IT security was a black box within a black box. People just didn't understand it. And if you've dealt with security people, and I forgive me for those of you who I put into this category, a lot of security people like to think in ones and zeros, black and white, here's right and here's wrong. And it's okay, because we want that and we need that. But we also realize that there's different shades of black and white depending on the situation and the scenario. And so the black box within the black box is really where a lot of our clients look for help of trying to figure out, okay, what is this? What does it mean? What should I be doing? In today's realm of security, the other thing is that we look at, even though we deal with technology, a lot of the things that we see in security are pretty basic. They're not using sophisticated technologies for initial cybersecurity attacks. A lot of the things they do in the back end, pretty sophisticated stuff, but how do they break in and how do they get into systems? What's the easiest way of breaking into a building, right? It's not at night when everything's shut down and there's a security guard. It's when the front doors are open and people have to swipe in. Is if they think you should be there, they won't kick you out. And IT security is the same thing. It's around attacking people as opposed to attacking technology, because we're the weakest links in all of it. So you hear of all these different scams. You hear of all different things of people gaining access. they were able to compromise a password. Phishing scams, I think we've probably all seen those, or we've had phone calls where, well, Microsoft is calling, we need a security patch on our home computer. Really? Oh, okay, I'll give you all my user IDs and passwords. The bank's calling, well, I don't deal with that bank. It's strange. Should I really give them my information? Sure, why not? Right? There's all these scams that are out there. Because the other thing, and I had one of my partners that always says to me, you know, in this world, it's, you know, organized crime. There's one thing about it. One, it's organized, and it's criminal behavior because there's a lot of cash. So they're well funded and they have a lot of resources. So this is a real big business, and they put a lot of time and energy into this. Right? They wanna make money. And that's the other thing that people don't always understand. For the most part, and it's not exclusively, because we've seen the denial of service attacks that went against the government of bringing the websites down, which were hacktivists, which they weren't looking for financial gain, they were trying to make a point. That's more the exception. The real day-to-day cybersecurity and things that go on, it's a business. And someone there is trying to make money, whether it's stealing your identity or stealing your credit card. They want to make money because they want that information so they can sell it to someone else who will use it. And so I think that's one of the things that people need to understand. With the resources around security, I think the other thing that people don't fully understand is they're organized crime, and they'll share any information, right? If there's money involved, they'll share their resources. A lot of organizations, private companies, public sector organizations, they don't want to share their vulnerabilities, right? It's like, I don't want to tell you what's bad about me. I want to tell you what's good about me. And so organizations traditionally have hesitated from sharing the bad stuff, of sharing threats of how we as an organization might have been attacked. How did they get into our computer systems? I don't want to tell them that, you know, they were able to get in a password file and it was in open text and we printed it and we left it in a taxi. I don't want to tell anyone that, right? But organized criminals, they have no problem of saying, hey, look what I found. By the way, I found 24 administrator passwords to this company. If you want it, it's available for $1,000. Here's how you can pay me. And so that's the other thing is they're getting a little bit more, once they get the basic stuff and they attack the people, they do have some pretty sophisticated tools behind them. But it's a business and they're investing a lot. The dark net and the dark world is investing a lot of monies into technical capabilities. So the gap between skill sets within organizations and the dark net, if you will, is widening. The other thing that, and you would have seen it, and it shows up in the newspaper almost on a daily basis of some cyber attack. So with it being a black box, executives really have gone and said, okay, this could be a big deal for me. The real thing that changed with Target and Home Depot is the directors, so the board of directors now found themselves facing lawsuits and finding that they were now becoming responsible for stuff. So they took an increased interest. And that's one thing about organizations, when the board of directors or the executives take notice, then it really does push it down from the tone at the top, and they take it much more seriously. In terms of, are we protected? What do we think? And in the realm of what we provide, we get asked a lot, how do we compare to other organizations? And I think the other thing that was there is, in the Home Depot example, it was a third party. You know, they were connected, it was to their HVAC supplier. And if you're not familiar with Home Depot, it was a lot of credit card information that was getting sent over to Russia, no doubt to be resold. They thought their systems were pretty secure, but someone who they had connected to wasn't quite as secure as them. And there was a connection and an access point, and that's how they got access to the information systems. And they were able to slowly, over the course of 8 months, and they're very patient because they know there's a lot of money and there's not a huge investment for them, so they'll be very, very patient. They coaxed one of the administrators into sharing some of their information. They sent them a fake email. They shared their Facebook password, and it turned out that their Facebook password happened to be the same password that they used at work, which is very, very common. So some pretty simple stuff. Once they were inside, then they just watched. They just watched for normal behavior, and they said, we're going to do this for another 8 months, and we're going to just do normal behavior so we don't get noticed when we do the stuff that's bad. And that's sort of how they attack. So I think I'll leave it at that. I'm probably at my 10 minutes, although I have no basis of knowing that because I can't see a clock. I am pretty passionate about working in this space. I deal with all sorts of clients, some that are very mature and some that know a lot more about it than I do, and some that don't. and I certainly recognize it when there's a technical capability really quickly, and it usually turns into a different type of conversation, and that might be a little bit more of a board management and managing executives, and trying to be that conduit between the technology, the people who really understand it, and sort of the boardroom and providing that conduit. So I think with that, I hand it back to here. Thank you.
Terrific. So thank you to all our speakers. It's my pleasure to now open the floor to questions. If you do have a question, please raise your hand, and I'll direct a member from our outreach team to provide you with a microphone.
My name is Sri Raman Rajan, and I'm a professor in systems and computer engineering here. We heard excellent talk from each one of you and touching the aspects of security. The question that I want to pose is that while we have enhanced security in many aspects of life, in one aspect we have not, actually we lost security, and that is in job. There is no job security anywhere. So from your perspective, what is the advice that you give to the audience here as to whether they should join a company and then innovate, or innovate forming a company?
Wow.
So I'll take my first stab and see if anyone has better things to add to it. Is it better to innovate as an individual or innovate as within an organization? I mean, I'll give you my own sense is within a company, you quite often get access to a lot more resources, and there's a good side and a bad side. If you recognize the type of resources that you can take advantage of, and you navigate your way through the organization really quickly, that can, I think, work to your real advantage. If you're not an innovative person, though, you may hesitate, and you may just sort of work within the rules and the realms and say, well, this organization works like that, I have to work like that. So you have to be a little bit careful. I think if you're an innovative person naturally, becoming part of an organization and building your own experiences and getting access to those resources, that's where I would naturally say start there and expand somewhere else. If you have that capability and you are an innovator, that'll follow you. But coming to an organization, you'll get access to a lot of resources. If you have access to resources already, and you can wait it out and it's okay, then go and do it on your own. That would be my own take.
Yeah, I would, it's a big question. I think there are really interesting opportunities in both directions. I think that there is a lot of opportunities we've seen for small companies, startups. The one thing I would caution against, though, and I can say this because I am an engineer, that often engineers think that technology will solve everything, and if I come up with good technology, then I'll be successful. And they underrate the importance of business and finance and marketing and sales. If you don't have a good marketing and sales strategy, you don't have your sales channels, you don't have a good business case in order to attract venture capital, you're not going to be successful. So if you're not ready to partner up with those other skill sets and recognize the value of those as equal partners, then go work for a company, because you won't be successful. And then the other thing, of course, is it takes time for a startup to start to generate revenue. You might work for a year or two before you actually make any income. If you can work out of your parents' basement and you think you've got the skills to do it, go for it. If you absolutely need that income, then it's going to be a tougher slog, right? And there are a lot of interesting opportunities in companies, depending on the size of the company. In small companies, as we saw, there's large growth, which results in opportunities to grow with the company. In larger companies, there's all kinds of different departments. And so, for example, in Telus Health, you could start off working on doctor's office systems and then move to hospital systems, move to pharmacy systems. So it really depends what you're looking for and what's important to you.
Yeah, so the question was around job security. And for me, like, the biggest thing that's most important to me is skills and being able to apply those skills. So whether it's an individual or within a company, if you're building and expanding the skill set and being able to apply those skills in different ways and not just going in one particular direction, building skills that are applicable and problem-solving skills that are applicable in multiple ways and being able to show those, that's really important. Doing things that are real are really important. So things that are like production in real life that people are using is super important. So if you're going to build something yourself, but no one else is going to use it, you're not going to learn a whole lot, and you're not going to build out the skills necessary to do things at a larger scale and to do things in real life. So anywhere that you can build out skills and do things in real life and get a lot of people using it, get feedback on how it's being used, and just expand those skill sets is valuable. Whether it's as an individual or within a company, it's kind of up to you what works best for you.
Yeah, and I would add actually, and agree, and in terms of job security, in terms of a company, I would say as a follow-on as well, that there is no such thing as job security. It isn't like our parents' generation where once you got a job, you were there for 30 years. But the thing I would say to all of you is you own your own career, right? So no matter where you are, whether you're in a startup or working for a small company or a large company, you have to stay relevant, and you have to make sure that you're keeping your skills up to date and that you're being productive part of that team and seen as being valuable and contributing. Because even if the finances turn around for that company and they do lay you off, if you've kept yourself relevant and you've kept your network, which is also really important, you will land another job very quickly.
Hi. So my question is, all of you use technology, and most of them are built on some sort of framework or foundation. So whether it's Shopify with their Ruby on Rails, whether it's Telus, I'm sure there's an underlying architecture, and same with the security. How do you guys look forward to make sure that you don't get caught behind the times with that architecture? So say, for example, Flash is a good example. Lots and lots of stuff was built on Flash. But if you didn't upgrade at the right time, you could end up with a very obsolete technology.
I can start with that. It's all about looking at what's happening and being really connected to what's going on. At the same time as we're using a framework, Ruby on Rails, that's really relevant now. We started using it 10 years ago when it wasn't as relevant and it wasn't as big. But looking at what it could do and where it was going, we could kind of see the trajectory of what it was going to take. So that was a big factor in us using it. And a big part of what we think about when we're building software at Shopify is about people being really productive. And so for us, Ruby is a language that's really productive. We also use Go and JavaScript, a lot of different things. And it's about being really productive and writing code that lots of other people are going to be able to understand and use really easily. It's also about building a system that continues to evolve over time. So the Shopify application has evolved over those 10 years instead of being replaced by new technologies that come along. So it's really dangerous and really tricky to kind of look ahead at what technologies are going to come up because there's new things all the time. But looking at what can last or what looks like it'll last and has a sort of a basis to last for a long period of time and make people really productive is really important, and not get caught up in changing things too often is really important.
Yeah, I would agree. I think in terms of changing things too often, certainly in terms of healthcare, these are big, gnarly, complicated systems, right? When you finally get a system that's installed into a hospital and is integrated with all the different lab systems, with the pharmacy systems and so on, there's a lot of spigots, a lot of work that's gone into that. Changing that out is not a trivial exercise, right? So first of all, it doesn't change over that quickly. So you do have more time than you think. But the second thing is you really need to design the architecture to be flexible, because it's very, very difficult to rip and replace these big systems. So you have to, typically you design an architecture that can be evolved. And then as you evolve it, you may end up with a hybrid system. And then you slowly convert part of the system over to the new technology and decommission the old part, because doing a rip and replace is very complex and it's very difficult to take your customers with you. If you basically build another system on the side, you're taking a lot of resources to build a whole new architecture, you're bleeding dry the support for your existing customers, and then you have to get full parity on that system of every single feature that they have today, and then convince them when you only have parity that they really should switch over because the technology's better, and they're going to say, but what does it do extra for me, right? You have to bring your customers along with you as you evolve.
Yeah, so from a security side, I would say there's two main components. But one is a little bit more basic of when you're first building it, and however it evolves, know what business problem is being solved, like what problems are you trying to solve. I think that's one of the messages I want to leave with everyone here is always make sure you know what problem you're solving and stick to that problem. Quite often what happens when a system is being architected and designed, people lose sight of what you're doing, and you might say, well, we need this version of this hardware and we have to change to this version of this software. And there may be some very valid and good reasons for doing that, but you lose sight of saying this was the problem we were originally set out to solve, and you end up in a different path, so the whole design changes. But you should always be prepared, and whatever you do is saying, well, remind me what problem we're trying to solve by doing this. That's number one. Number two, in the security realm, the notion of vulnerability management and sort of looking at versions of software and hardware that you have deployed within a system or an architecture is pretty big. Every day there's some new vulnerability that someone publishes saying, this organization got attacked because they didn't have the latest version of software on their Cisco router. Or, this is a new vulnerability that we found that someone has figured out. Because you got to understand, there's people out there looking at every single component, IT component, and trying to figure out what could I do, how could I use this to my advantage, and some for good reasons and some for not so good reasons. So having a really disciplined process and it really is that. It's a disciplined process following a standard like ITIL that says, here's how we're going to make sure that our software components are where we want them. And it may not be, we have the most up-to-date, because history has shown from a security side, sometimes I have the most up-to-date, and that new one now introduces a new vulnerability because they put a patch to it, and that actually created a new problem that they hadn't thought about. So having a process and a way of evaluating it, so before you deploy those things, whether it's to customers or whether it's your own clients or it's your own base, of just making sure you understand what those elements are. So that's kind of how you stay there is from my view, is always asking the question of what are we trying to do, and make sure we're managing the risks and we understand we have a framework and a process for evaluating that.
Hello, I am Ahmed Hulba, third year student software engineering. I do have a question for the three companies respecting about the resume. What makes a resume outstanding from the three company perspective? I would like to know for people with no work experience as students, and if the person has a work experience. That's all.
I can go first. So I talked to a bunch of people about this earlier, but I'll just go through it again. For Shopify, we don't really care about necessarily specific work experience, GPA, degree, background, any of that sort of stuff. We're looking for people who are really smart, can solve problems, and can show how to solve those problems. So typically for interns, new grads, or like recent grads, I look for three different things. I look for people who've been able to go really deep in a technology, language, framework. I look for people who can go take a wide view and have went broad in different technologies, so have learned a bunch of different languages and technologies. And then I look for people who are really passionate and excited about programming and building software and solving problems. And I usually hope to get 2 out of 3, because with 2 out of 3, I can usually generate the third one in them because of our environment and just like working with them. And with those 2 out of those 3, you can usually get the third one pretty easily, or show that you can build out the third one. So those are the 3 things I typically look for people who don't really have much work experience.
Yeah, it's a good question. For somebody, in either case, whether you have work experience or not, a hiring manager, like when I'm looking for people, usually you get a stack of resumes, right? So you want to make sure that the relevant information that you really want to push forward is immediately visible on the resume. You've got maybe 30 seconds to basically end up in one pile or another. So don't, basically a skills-based resume is much better, where you identify the skills on the outside and then put some details, whereas a date-based resume, where the first thing I scan down and see is just dates, is it's okay to bury the dates. What I really want to know is, what do you have to offer me, right? Having a paragraph at the top, if you don't have a lot of skills in terms of what are you passionate about, what are you really going after, what's your vision for your career, and seeing that, you've gone above and beyond just going to school. So if you don't have any experience, well, have you taken leadership roles in some kind of a community organization, a university organization, right? Have you done volunteering? And, you know, how have you contributed in some other ways in order to, you know, to show that you've got the skills, you've got the staying power, you're interested, you're passionate, you're willing to get out there. If you've got experience, then again, the important thing is showing you know, what that experience is and making sure that that's pulled out so it's quickly visible on the resume. And then tailoring your resume to whoever you're applying to so that the skills that are most relevant to that particular job ad are really pulled out. Don't just, you know, fire off the same resume and covering letter to every company. Really, it's important to take the time to tailor that so it fits with what that company's looking for.
Yeah, so I think that's great advice in terms of the 30. So we do the same thing. The 30-second rule is literally 30 seconds, and you decide whether you're going to read more or you're going to look further. So I won't repeat the same things. I'll sort of add a couple of things that are helpful. And one of them is your name, of figuring out, do people know you, right? So the company you're applying to, do you go to things like this of interacting and figuring out, you know, can I, if I'm not going to have a great resume or don't have the experience, I want to make sure I'm showing the energy. Showing the other things that you do, I think, is absolutely key. I think showing you're taking on responsibilities and you've done multiple things, and look, I was able to do this and I was able to do that. I'll say the one thing on grades, we don't look at it exclusively. I mean, to me, the grades tell a story. I'll tell one quick story of someone that we did give an offer to at the end, but he went to another organization. I just was looking at his grades, and they were okay. There was nothing wrong with them, but he had one semester where they were just absolutely awful. And I asked him, I said, would you like to talk about that semester? And it becomes a discussion point. And he said, well, no, not really. And I said, okay. And then he goes, but I'm going to. He goes, so I lived at home in first year, and then in second year, I didn't live at home. And he gave a pause, and I kind of went, okay. And he goes, well, I didn't go to class as much. I had a really good time, and I learned a lot. And I said, okay, so what did you learn? He goes, well, I learned that I can't party every night, and school's not a party, and I got to work really hard. And I did that, and here's where I changed it. And the rest of his marks were actually quite good. If I was just looking at his GPA, trust me, his marks were pretty bad in that semester. I would have dismissed him, but we actually knew this person. He had socialized throughout a lot of recruiting events, and that's how he got through the first scanning of recruiting. We knew who he was, and the types of folks that we look for are people that we think can work as part of a team. And if they're not going to be that, then it is that deep skill set of something that we're looking for. I think the tailoring it to what you're applying to is key. Know what they do and try to, if you're not 100% sure, we'll take your best guess because you're showing that you're trying to tailor it. I can spot a generic resume really quickly after 20 years of going through them. You can spot one that's the exact same everywhere else. So try to change it up a little bit, even in any way, shape, or form. Make sure you're conveying that you know what you're applying for. And I love the idea of the paragraph. That's the best way to do it for the folks who don't have the experience. For experience, to me, it's skills, and that's going to be the big one. You're looking for the hot skills and putting yourself out there.
Hello, I'm a first-year student, and I realize that all three of your companies have to deal directly with customers, where they have to come in, they ask you for something. I know that when Deloitte came up, you said that they sometimes don't cooperate very well, but what do you do with uncooperative clients, or how do you get them, how do you draw information from them? In terms of the medical systems, do you have surveys with doctors? Do you sit down and ask them what they need improved? How do you further your company's success while you have to deal with humans? That might be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So we, quite often when we go and work at clients, there are people there who do not want us there for a variety of reasons. and some might be justified, but some they just, you know, back to the notion of job security. Sometimes when you bring in a third party, it's like, well, are you going to be here to replace me? Well, I'm not going to help you, and I'm going to put up some roadblocks. In my business training, one of the things that we spend a lot of time with is understanding people and understanding different personalities, and a little bit of psychology that you kind of underestimate. But I think working with people and understanding what's going to motivate those individuals of saying, okay, and it's not, you don't just tell them, you know, something because they want to hear it. You tell them okay, I need to try to figure out how we can all work together. Because on big teams and on big IT projects, and you'll see it where there's people who just have conflict and they don't want to work together. Part of it is just spending time of breaking down and figuring out how do you find common ground. And sometimes, you know what, sometimes you can't. And you do see people come and go off of projects because they're slowing a project down, they're slowing an initiative down, and that's okay, right? That actually helps a team move further along because you're recognizing where something isn't there. So there's not one magical formula of how you do it. I mean, how do I get a client that buys into it? Because I think one of the key things in any technology thing, I'm not going to call it change management, because if you've done an IT class, you'll quickly go, okay, I understand what change management is. It's a pillar in my IT side that I have to know. No, I'm talking the management of change, and it's getting people to do things differently is a really, really important skill set. That if you're going to figure out one thing of working with, or a skill set to take away, is the management of change. And people do call that change management, but I'm going to call it the management of change, and convincing people to do something different than they're currently doing. In particular, when you're introducing new technologies, people resist it. They like their old way. We all do it at home. You know, we had a TV, and I got pretty used to the channel changer, and it did this, and now I don't know how to do that, and the volume's all different. That happens in the business world of you have a new system, and they got used to doing the things their way, and the second that changes, you change anything about how a person is at their work, and if they've been doing that for 3 years, they'll resist, and they won't be happy. So you have to figure out how do you deal with that, how do you recognize that? People will turn around and say that technology failed. They'll blame technology all the time. Well, that technology failed. No, usually what fails in most projects is they didn't manage the change associated with that technology. They underestimated how big of a change it was to how people would work, and it falls apart. So from a pure technology perspective, it's recognizing that that's going to be an issue, and putting time and energy into planning that out, because it does take a lot of planning through to the execution of it. And it really is just working with people, and when there's disagreements is hit them head on, right? And you never let things fester. When things fester, and I think this happens in any realm, but certainly in the business realm, if things fester, people come up with their own conclusions, people start adding facts to things, and all of a sudden it's a much bigger issue. You have to deal with that conflict really, really quickly, and I don't think that's any different in any walk of life.
Boy, that's a big question. How do you deal? That's a very good one. Do I have an hour and a half to respond? There's two different questions I see there. One is, how do you understand your customers' needs and be sure you understand your customer needs? And then the other one is, how do you deal with things when they go wrong? From the customer need perspective, there's two very different, distinct group of people, certainly for complex systems. And I like to call them the chooser versus the user. So when you go and sign the contract, it's typically the choosers who've put this list of requirements together that they want you to bid on. You win the bid on that. Now, our very complex telehealth systems are highly configurable. So then we have to work with the users to figure out what they really need and what they really want. And typically we put together, especially in large organizations, what I'll call a champions group, where we get a representative sample of, we did this for a hospital system, pharmacists, physicians, nurses, who actually have the position in the organization to influence. And if you get their buy-in, you work iteratively with them to understand their needs, to develop concepts, to work through workflow, doing job shadowing in their organizations, understand how their organizations really work, understanding their language and what's important to them, and then bringing them along with you as you configure and deliver the system, so that when it is implemented, and we have to help them manage change management, and I agree can be a major reason for failure of a system. Those champions in the organization are now so bought in and so partnered with you that they're going to make this happen, right? So that's a huge part of it. and we also measure our customers' satisfaction very closely at Telus with regular surveys in order to understand, where they are in terms of their satisfaction and address those issues. Things go sour though. Sometimes things end up taking a lot longer than you think, or there are issues with reliability or scalability. In that case, I agree, you have to hit them head on, listen to the customer, make them feel heard, and then work together to figure out how you're going to solve the problem. And that can be very challenging. You need good listening, good negotiation skills, but you also can't necessarily, deliver twice as much as the customer paid for, because you're not a charity. You have to make money at the end of the day, otherwise the company won't continue to exist. So it's a challenging one. Did you want to respond, or?
So Shopify doesn't do client work, but a lot of what you both said apply to how we figure out what we want to build for our merchants. What I'd like to spin it as, what you guys have talked about isn't just relevant for working with clients, but teams who are building things together. All the same things that you guys described are relevant, like being able to change and move quickly, being able to resolve conflicts, being able to work together and understand each other is super important for development teams and people building products and building software. It's relevant there as well as working with clients.
Apparently we are out of time. One more.
So on the topic of relevance, how do your companies stay relevant in a field where you have to constantly be innovative? So what type of hardships do you guys go through? What kind of meetings do you hold? How do you depict your company to people like us that keep us interested in your company?
Well, I think having a really, certainly for a big company like Telus Health, you need to have a really clear strategy that is compelling, that makes sense, but that every single one of your employees understands and is aligned to and can explain to anybody. So our strategy is reach, collaboration, and outcomes, as I talked about earlier. Every one of our employees should know that. So basically working towards that is first strategy was reach. So basically, how do you get the systems out into the marketplace and gain market share? Because the second stage you want to get to is connecting those systems. So one of the things Telus Health did is actually went out and bought a bunch of companies just to get market share. We bought doctor's office systems in Ontario and Quebec, in Alberta and BC, right? And now that we have all those systems, now we can sort of align them, bring them together, and get them to start talking to each other and start talking to we did the same with pharmacy systems. So having a good strategy that everybody can align to is really important. And then having, obviously really good business people who understand what's coming in the marketplace, what's the legislative environment. In terms of healthcare, the political environment, legislative environment is very important. Having people who understand the tech, so it's not just about the technology. And then having really good architects who understand where the technology is going, what opportunities are available with new technologies that's coming out, and how can we best leverage those in a cost-effective way to solve the business problems that at the end of the day we need to solve in order to stay relevant to the market. At the end of the day, it's like you said earlier, it's not technology for technology's sake, it's what business problem am I trying to solve, and how do I leverage the latest technology to help me get there.
Quickly we do a bunch of we'll invest where our clients are spending. We'll follow the dollars. But I'll leave it with this is we try to arm ourselves so we're in a position to tell a client what they need to hear versus what they want to hear. And that can sometimes be a really tough thing to do. Quite often they'll hire us to say, okay, you're a third party. Can't you here's what we want to do. Can you just kind of rubber stamp that it's good? Well, no, if we think it's crap, we're going to tell you it's crap. And that, we got to be in a position to arm ourselves to be able to call out when things are not good ideas. And so just naturally that takes a lot of time. The types of meetings we have, we pull in all sorts of different skill sets, all sorts of different walks of life to talk about what a client is dealing with when we are dealing with a client issue. And we get lots of different points of views on it. So we have to have a point of view. And in order to get an educated point of view where people will invite us back, there's a lot of clients who we've had over the years who get really pissed off at us. They're really unhappy with the things we tell them because it's not what they wanted to hear. I can tell you, like, the number of examples that where we've seen clients later, and there's like, look, you guys told us what we needed to hear, and so thank you. We weren't happy with you, and we didn't hire you for 3 more years, but you told us what we needed to hear, and so it's about educating ourselves and arming our network for answering those types of tough questions, technology or otherwise.
I would add to that, just being able to change and evolve quickly is really important to stay relevant these days. If you have a system that you need to like deploy or release like once a year, it's going to be really hard to change depending on where like the business is going or where technology is going or anything like that. But if you can release changes or make changes to the system every day or multiple times a day, you have a lot more power to pivot or change or evolve as the world's changing around you. And that's really important and helpful.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you all for the fantastic questions. There's more questions in the audience, and hopefully our panelists will be able to stick around for the networking session to follow. So let's have another big round of applause for our 3 panelists.
So this actually concludes the formal part of today's event. So thank you very much for our panelists, and thank you all for coming. It's always a pleasure to see our graduates and alumni. So I'm sure all of us benefited from the discussions that took place, and we've gained valuable insight as to the future trends and where things are going and things that are important. So I invite you now to join our reception in the atrium just outside those doors here, and hopefully we'll continue to mingle with our guests and with each other. So thank you very much for coming. It was a pleasure to have you here today.